Hey, what's good, peeps? Good to have you back for another video. Now, today I want to take you through the top 4 builds for Barbarian in Season 4. Now, you might be thinking, why 4? That's a bit of an odd number for a top list. You're right, but these 4 builds perform head and shoulders over everything else. All of the other builds, they need really specific, really high-end gear to be even in the ballpark of the ones that we're going to be covering today. And don't worry, if you see a build that you like, I have included a build planner down in the description below for every single one of them. And kicking this list off, we have one of the most chill specs and one of my favorite builds actually of all time, and that is Whirlwind, but more specifically, Whirlwind with Dust Devils. This is the perfect build for those of you who want something to speed farm Hell Tides, Nightmare Dungeons, and it's no slouch in the pit either. You can farm up to tier 70s with relatively accessible gear, and you can start getting that Neath Iron so you can start upgrading your build and pushing further and further. But this build really is focused on that speed farming stuff. It's got a lot of movement speed. It's got a ton of AoE naturally. Being a Whirlwind build, it has a 360-degree attack pattern, as well as the Dust Devils that just fill the entire screen up and murder everything that you can see. And that is honestly what's really carrying the build this season. It is those Dust Devils. It's thanks to those changes to flat damage aspects. We've got the new one as well, Fierce Winds, which does a ton of extra damage every time we use one of our shouts. We have got the changes to Devilish and also the changes to Dust Devils that just make these tornadoes insane. They deal so much damage, and they help not only with increasing the range of our AoE, but also gives Whirlwind an absolute ton of single target DPS, which is where the build was lacking most in the past. And this means that we can play a true to Whirlwind build, meaning that we're not using like Hota or Death Blow or Kick or something like that in order to kill bosses. We can just play Whirlwind, and I'm absolutely in love with that. And another one of the great things about this build is it doesn't need the best gear in the world to be powerful. You need the aspects, but aspects are much easier to get these days. You don't need any uber uniques, but they do help. It's just a nice, accessible build that you can start playing from pretty early into your journey and will take you pretty far into the end game as well. Couldn't recommend it enough. Now, moving on to the next build on our list, and I got to admit, it was really hard deciding which one was going to be 4th and which one was going to be 3rd, because these builds are neck and neck. They really are. So this is Double Swing with Dust Devils, and in a lot of ways, it is very similar to the Whirlwind build. It has great AoE. It's very fast, and it's very accessible as well. You don't need the best gear in the world. It's something that you can play from early on. You could even level with this build, but what this does have different is that it has a higher emphasis on the single target side of things, not quite as much AoE, and it has got a better performance in the pit. So if that is your primary focus for your build, then you may be more toward the double swing side of things. As for playstyle, it is very similar to Whirlwind, where you're basically holding down your core skill and just cycling through your shouts while your character runs off into enemies and bulldozes all of them. It's got a very snappy animation. I really like the way Double Swing feels as you're plowing through the enemies. It's just got that snappy responsiveness to it, which I really enjoy from builds. It's very tanky as well. Actually, all of these builds are very tanky. The Barb is like an absolute brick wall this season, which is fantastic. So you're not going to be dying every 5 minutes or anything like that. Now, something I forgot to mention about Whirlwind, but it's the same here for Double Swing as well. Both of these builds have next to no resource issues whatsoever, which I feel like is a very important point to bring up. You can just basically use your main damaging ability practically all of the time, as long as you have the correct aspects on your gear. And the benefit of this is it just gives you a nice, straightforward, relaxed play style that you can rely on. It's very consistent, right? It's always going to play the same regardless of what situation that you're in. And like I said, it was very hard to decide how to rank Double Swing versus Whirlwind, but because it has that extra push potential in pit, we're going to keep this at number 3. But honestly, if you want to go Whirlwind, boys, I mean, it's a personal preference thing at the end of the day. And now moving on to rank 2, and this build is pretty insane. So we're going to be talking a little bit about Leapquake Thorns. And this is a really interesting build, because not only can you just do insane amounts of damage. I've seen players get to nearly 500 million HP with this build, and that comes down a lot to the new tempers. What we're doing with this build is we are stacking imposing presence tempers on our defensive pieces of gear, which scales our HP up to absolutely mental amounts. And not only does this make you, obviously really, really tanky, you then use the outburst passive to scale your thorns on your bonus HP. So we're getting all of that extra health, and we're getting an absolute ton of damage, making us just like insane, just this unkillable, super, super high DPS class. And then leveraging the bonuses from Leapquake to bolster that to absurd levels of power. We've got the aspects of Bulkathos and Earthquake that give us 25% DR and damage, as well as the Rumble Glyph, which will give us a 10% damage boost per active Earthquake to bosses and crowd-controlled enemies, which will be most of them because we're stunning a whole bunch. And the awesome thing about this is that with high cooldown reduction, we can get like 10 to 15 Earthquakes up at any one time for absolutely astronomical damage boosts. The build is so powerful, in fact, it's one of the top pushers in the pit. We're looking at like 130 to 140 clears with this build as a solo barb. It's insane, right? It's absolutely bonkers. But as you would expect, this does come with some drawbacks. First of all, the gear requirement is really, really high. This is a true end game build, so this is not something that I would recommend for somebody who's just hit level 100. And Thorns in particular has a bit of a mechanical drawback in that you need enemies to hit you in order to do damage. And the reason that this is a problem is that some enemy types have very slow attack animations, and some bosses also same situation where they just attack very irregularly, and this can cause your DPS to fall right through the floor. So it's a little inconsistent in its performance against certain enemy types is what I'm trying to say. In my opinion, if you're going to play Thorns, if you want to be that insane damage reflecting unkillable tank, you do have to perhaps look at supporting this character with a speed farmer. By having another character, you could have another Whirlwind Barb, you could have a double swing Barb. I mean, if you really wanted to, I guess you could level another class. I wouldn't recommend that because after all, Barb is the best class in the game. But, it's going to be very hard to take Thorns out of pit and then say, for example, have a good time doing like Nightmare Dungeons or Hell Tides because you're just standing around waiting for things to hit you. Now, let's get into that last build, the rank 1 build for Barbarian. And for a lot of people, you won't be surprised to hear that it is Bash. Bash is mega strong and in every way possible. Super low cooldown reductions, ultra tanky, and the damage is insane. It's the highest DPS build for Barbarian, with also the highest clear for group and solo play in the pit. I think it's somewhere like around 140 at the moment. Insane performance. And a big part of what's making this so strong is all of the buffs that basic skills got this season. I mean, first of all, we've got the Bash temper on weapons, which gives us the ability to turn Bash into an AoE, as well as juicing the damage an ungodly amount. We have the aspect of Hectic, Moonrise, and Adaptability, which just gives basic attacks so much extra damage and utility that it's just hard not to go with them. And then on top of that, we have the really cool tech with the Pain Gorges and Rupture. And the way that this works, we take the Pain Gorges unique gloves, which apply a debuff to enemies when we use a skill that echoes and doubles the damage of our basic skill attacks, which right away you can see the value in that. Doubles the damage and echoes it to everything that was affected by the skill. And the skill that we use to apply that debuff is Rupture, and Rupture is a 360-degree AoE. It has insane range, but it also grants us 40% attack speed. So the synergy here is insane. So what we're doing is we're taking that really powerful Bash foundation and then adding this Pain Gorge's Rupture tech onto it for just insane, absolutely insane damage. And the numbers speak for itself. It is by and far the most powerful build in every sense that you can measure it. One of the nice things about this build as well is that unlike the Thorns build, It's not relegated to exclusively pit content. This is a much more versatile build. Now, it won't really stand its ground for speed farming versus Whirlwind or Double Swing, but it's absolutely no slouch in that regard. You can go do Hell Tides with this pretty quickly. You can do bounties. You can do whatever you want with this build. It's a good all-rounder. So it's the kind of thing that I could easily recommend to somebody to play from start to finish, because you can even level with some of the variants of this build. You won't be able to play this one specifically, but there's a linear progression through the build variants that you can take to get to this point from practically level 1, or as soon as you hit that bash can cleave temper. Now, as I said before, you will have a build planner for each and every one of these builds down in the description below, and we include these variations in there so that you can follow it along depending on where you are in your journey on your Barbarian. And there they are. Those are the builds. I really hope there was one on this list for you. If there was, let me know which build you decided to go for. If you have any questions, you can always jump into my Discord, or you can ask in the comments down below, and I'll do my best to answer them as soon as possible. But thank you for watching. Appreciate your time. Don't forget to leave a like and maybe subscribe if you enjoyed the content. It really helps the channel out, and I massively appreciate it. But till next one, love you. Bye.